gate in a part of the Jerusalem wall called the Needle's Eye. Now this was meant to accommodate caravans who arrived at the wall after the big gates had been closed for the day and needed to be let in. And it was just big enough for a camel to come through on his knees. And so the person would bring his camel to this little gate, little hole in the wall, and unload everything off the camel and carry this luggage through this gate onto the inside of the wall, then bring his camel through on his knees. And they have said this is what it means by having the camel go through the eye of the needle. There are those who give a second interpretation and just say it's a hyperbole, that obviously the camel is big, the eye of the needle is small, no camel can go through the eye of a needle. And Jesus is simply saying in this hyperbolic way that it's difficult for people who trust in riches to make it. It's the same kind of a hyperbole that you get in earlier when Jesus talked about the mote and the beam. He said back in the Sermon on the Mount that before you go around complaining to other people and finding fault with them and saying, my brother, let me help you. I think I see don't I see a speck in your eye, a mote, huh? A speck of dust? Jesus said it might be that you could see better to take the mote out. If you get the 2x4 out, that is sticking out of your own eye. Now there's no 2x4 sticking out of a man's eye. It's a beam, he calls it. Hyperbole. It's an overstatement, an exaggeration for effect. It's not a lie. Everybody understands it. In any case, the warning here is that it's difficult for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. Bud, read for us verse 25 and 26. We'll pick this up again.
When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished, saying, Who then can be saved? But Jesus looked at them and said to them, With men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible.
We mentioned just two studies ago that Jesus had talked about the Pharisees. We talked about their elaborate rules, their elaboration of the 600+ laws or direct commands of Moses. And beside this matter of keeping food warm on the shelf above the stove, which they permitted and did not permit keeping the kettle on the stove between the Friday night and the Sabbath. Beside that, they had regulations about the eating of eggs. The question is, if a hen lays an egg on the Sabbath, is it a wicked egg? Can you eat the egg? Obviously, the hen must be a terrible sinner. And she doesn't know any better, but she's a terrible sinner because she worked on the Sabbath. Can you profit from her Sabbath labor? Can you eat the egg, or must you let the egg go? And this type of hair splitting that Jesus disliked so much, the disciples are saying the only people who can really learn all these rules and keep all these rules are folks who have time to study this. And friends, time is money. And only the rich people can afford to learn all these rules. And for a rich man who puts his money into time to study the law of God, so he can know and observe and do all these rules and regulations, if he can't make it, then who can make it? Jesus said, well, he said, with God, with man, that would be impossible. But with God, all things are possible, even for the rich. But he would warn us today, as he warned them then, that this is a danger, and the possession of riches is dangerous. Hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. It's obvious I'm not running for office anywhere or seeking for popularity. Because what I'm saying to you is not what people want to hear. If you want that said to you, you'll have to get somebody else to say it. And there'll be plenty who'll do it. We turn now to this application to the disciples, and we find Peter talking in verse 27, and Jesus' response down to verse 29, if you will read.
Then Peter said in reply, Lo, we have left everything and followed you. What then shall we have? Jesus said to them, Truly I say to you, in the new world, when the Son of Man shall sit on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or children, or lands, for my name's sake, will receive 100-fold.
One of the big questions of biblical interpretation is whether or not the church replaces Israel in the promises of God. The standard interpretation followed by a typical Calvinist is that the church does replace the Israelis in the kingdom of God, so no promise to Jews is yet to be fulfilled except through the church. We find here, however, that Jesus has said to Peter and to the apostles that in the world to come, that is in the kingdom to come, or the millennium, that they're going to sit on thrones and they will judge the 12 tribes of Israel, the Israelis. We find that in the book of Revelation, that around the eternal throne of God in the New Jerusalem, that there are 24 elders. These represent the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles, one standing for the old dispensation, one standing for the new. We find that between the gates of pearl and the foundations, one of them represents the 12 tribes of Israel, the other the 12 apostles, both of these being in the same wall of the same New Jerusalem. And as far as we can tell from those verses, the church does not replace Israel in the counsels of God. At least bear this in mind when you study these passages. And then he goes on to say that nobody has left father, mother, brothers, sisters, home, lands for my sake, but shall receive in this world 100-fold beside what he's going to receive in eternity. And as we close this session, let me give you a word of testimony out of my own personal experience. Because as I have given myself to the work of the Lord, I think about the fact that people where I've gone around the world, I've not gone clear around, but where I have gone, have opened their hearts and their doors to me. I have been entertained by ministers with totally inadequate incomes in Latin America when I visited their homes, in Sao Paulo and elsewhere. I've been taken to their homes by missionaries who were fighting inflation, and I was met by them. And I've experienced the fact that I've been given 100-fold, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, among my Christian brethren around the world. May you find it also.
Now we trust that you've taken your notes and you're now ready to take our TV Bible exam, which is coming right up. The word religion comes from what root? To regulate, bind, or rule.